Calling all villagers of the village of nothing much. It's Kathryn, the head of the village circle of witches. Check out my sparkle freckles. That part's not a filter. Hi. Hello, everyone. I am so glad to see you signing on, sharing a little bit of story time with me. I wanted to have this live because sometimes what I do, it's sort of isolated, right? I write my stories, I read my stories. You hear them or you don't because you're sleeping. And sometimes I want to talk about them with you. And writing this month's stories about the circle, about the village, a whole month of Halloween stories was so much fun that I just wanted to talk about them with you and hear what you think. Oh, there's my cuckoo clock. So I thought we might go through them sort of one at a time. And if you have particular questions about the story, you can ask them. Since I'm going to be kind of dividing my attention, I'll probably say, give me a question now and wait. I'm a really bad multitasker. And then I'm going to talk to you just a little bit about my own haunted house and show you some pictures that came out of my attic. I just saw someone say they would read novels about the circle of nothing much witches. I would love to write them for you as soon as I have time. There's clearly whole books here that are just waiting to happen. Okay, so the first October story was episode 37, Gray Cat and Grimoire. So we are back in the curio shop with Cinder and sort of our original witch from Grandmother's Grimoire. And it was interesting to write that story and go back and read the story from the year before. They actually both end on the same line where Cinder meows in agreement. So this witch, obviously she has some powers of knowing. She gets these moments of just like a dawning of awareness, which also happens to me. Mine are usually kind of boring. Like, I'll just suddenly know that my trunk is open. But hers are a little bit more exciting. And she has this understanding by flipping through the grimoire that there's a mystery at the inn. And even going back to last year, she knew that there was something at the inn that was calling to her, and that turned out to be Sycamore. But it makes me think that there's a very magical connection to the inn itself. Something about that special place that calls the circle in. If you have a question about the curio shop, about Cinder, or about this particular witch, the one who owns the curio shop, lay it on me. I'll give you a second to type. Nobody has any questions? Yeah, I do write a lot about how intuition is kind of its own kind of magic. And that was something that developed in me over time, was relearning to listen to intuition. I feel like intuition is something that is taught out of us as we grow up. You know, the first time you're taught you have to hug somebody that you don't want to hug when you're a little kid. Sometimes, you know, those are moments when your intuition is quashed. And then as grown-ups, sometimes we don't know how to get in touch with those feelings anymore. We don't trust them when they show up. So just getting back into your intuition, I'm going to give you a really quick intuition practice. If this is something that you want to work on, try stretching yourself out someplace totally comfortable, be at ease, sort of like you're meditating. Take a couple of deep breaths, and then just say something that is undeniably true, like, today is Tuesday. It's true, right? There's no debate about it. And notice that how it feels in your body to speak the truth. And then later, when you have other moments when you're testing it out, look for those same feelings. Is what I'm saying now true? Is my body recognizing it as true? That's a simple way to build on your intuition. Someone said, do you know how long the shop has been open in the village? It feels like shop has its own mind too. The shop definitely does. I think this particular shop was opened by this witch, so it's only been open for a few years because that's when she was gifted the grimoire. But did her grandmother own this space 50 years before? I think there's a lot of echoes in the village, just like there are at the inn. Someone said, the inn sounds huge. Is it? It kind of is. It's really big. It's at least 3 floors with an attic. It has that giant ballroom. I have said before how many rooms are in it, and I don't want to say again because I know I'll get it wrong. We have a village archivist who compiles sort of all this data so that I can go back and look at it. But it's a very big place with long hallways on a good stretch of land. It's big. Amy asked if the curio shop is also haunted. I think there's energy there. I don't know that there's specific ghosts yet. I think we've sort of just seen one at the inn. Cinder seems like a familiar and not a real cat. Strange she was grandmother's cat. Is it strange? To me, it seems like that is exactly the behavior of a familiar. Obviously, this cat could not have lived 60 years or however long. It's probably not 60 years. I feel like this witch is probably in her 30s and 40s. And this cat came to her 5 years ago, but also was with her grandmother when she herself was 5. So this is not a regular cat. So I think that, and often I've described it sort of as a relationship of friendship, and it feels more like a familiar to me. Okay, I'm gonna go on to the next story, but if you have more questions, we can go back to it. So the next story is Crows and Candles, and kind of plays on last year's story of the witches going to the graveyard to clean the gravestones. And this witch, who is the narrator of the story, is the one who first found the curio shop. There's that 2-episode arc where one is her on the outside looking in and the witch on the outside waiting to welcome her in and talk to her. And now she's kind of more fully grown into her powers, and some of her powers is that she communicates with animals. Not a skill I have, besides being able to, respond to their body language and to get to know your animals in sort of the same way most people who love animals do. So she goes to set up wards, protection wards, and revive certain spells and light candles and speak with the crows. And in a very nonchalant, I sort of threw away the detail in that story. One of the gifts that the crows give her, because often when you leave crows gifts, they leave you gifts back, is a little rusty key that she puts in her pocket and will come up later. If anybody has questions about Crows and Candles or this particular witch, someone says, I love the new witch. She resonates with me. Right on. I'm glad to hear, I like to present different ideas, and hopefully some feel like familiar to you. In the original telling of this witch, I described her more as a healer, and then I felt like maybe she developed a little bit more skill of communication with animals. A cool product idea could be a grimoire type journal, something with content in it, and which room we could add, and which we had room to add to. This is my journal right now. Peep the sticker. We're going to have a sticker collection soon, so you can just buy stickers. But I am working on a Nothing Much Happens journal, and there would be prompts and also space for you to write. So great minds think alike. I'm so glad that my show can be there for you in difficult moments. I hope, I can guarantee it always will be. It will never not be available to you. Yeah, a lot of people haven't heard all the stories, and that's why we decided to put in the encore episodes, because a lot of times you've been asleep. Good, that's the point. That's always my first goal, is just that you sleep. But we realized there was probably just a lot of stories that you've never heard. We are over 300 episodes now. So that's why we put those encore episodes in, thinking you might not have heard this one before. I'm sure we will do a episode of Slightly More Happens or Much More Happens, where we put all the witchy stories together for you to enjoy. Those are part of the Premium Plus perks. I'm going to go ahead and move on, because then we had to get to the inn. All Hallows Eve at the inn. So in which the innkeeper and Sycamore are... I just said I was a terrible multitasker. Someone's asking about the wedding. You mentioned a wedding? Girl, you've missed so much. I'm excited for you. There's so much to read or to listen to. Last September, there was a 5 and 6, if you've got premium, story arc about Marmalade and Crumb's mom marrying Birdie's dad, and it happens at the inn. Go listen to it. Have fun. So in this episode, the innkeeper and Sycamore are getting ready for a big Halloween party at the inn, which I've referenced before in previous episodes, that this was always sort of like a long-standing tradition at the inn, and the innkeeper is reviving it. If you remember in the other innkeeper, that's where she comes and finds the tarot card that kind of reminds her of the Halloween parties at the inn, in which case she decides to become the new innkeeper. Somebody asked, she's in the apartment above the flower shop. Are there other stories about her besides the graveyard stories? I believe she is the narrator in the story called Table for One. There might be more, but she is at least the narrator in Table for One. Focus, Kathryn. This is not my strong suit. Okay, so we're at the inn. All those pumpkins lit up. Chef has thoughtfully put rechargeable lights and all the pumpkins. I love that moment. I feel like Chef and the innkeeper have this really lovely friendship where, she's just sort of a little bit dreamier, and Chef, they're just a little bit more practical. She's usually wandering around, and then Chef's like, have you eaten? Here's a plate. And I really love that about them. So there's this really kind of spooky moment in this story, right? Where she's getting dressed as the original innkeeper, and she looks at herself in the mirror and she sees herself, but she also doesn't. There's something about her that she is glimpsing a moment of the other innkeeper, as if she could be stepping into her body in that moment. And I really loved writing that. I loved being able to wander down a slightly spooky path. And as someone who lives in a haunted house, I've learned to make friends with the ghosts and kind of appreciate the company. So I hope that was fun for y'all as well. Let me know if you have any innkeeper or Sycamore specific questions. Chef's Stay Puffed costume versus pickle. It was really fun. Yes, of course there are non-binary folks who live in the village, so I'm happy to write about them. Just like there are non-binary folks who live in every neighborhood all over the world. That's the exciting thing about finding out the world is more varied than you thought. I just think it's lovely and exciting, and I want to hear everyone's stories. So the last story of the Halloween, wait, do you know anything about Sycamore's backstory? A bit of a familiar too. Okay, so here's what we know about Sycamore. Sycamore was found in that tree, right? And that old sycamore tree that sits on the side of the inn, I wrote about it that it used to have a tree house in it, that when the inn was a school way back in its history, that the children who went to that school played in that tree house. And as soon as I wrote that, I was like, oh, this is its own book. I could feel sort of the energy of those kids up in the tree house and wondering what happened to that tree house. I like this feeling that sometimes energy of like big emotions builds up around a place and maybe creates something new. And I feel like Sycamore has that sort of playful energy that was born out of whatever was left over from the kids playing in the tree house. That's all I know about him right now, but I'm sure we will learn more over time. So in the last story of the month-long stories, we got to the secret stair, which I'm just going to ask you right now to please forgive me. I'd already written 4 stories. That last story was the longest story I have ever written for the podcast, and it could have been way longer. But at a certain point, I had to call it. And so when I sent it to Bob, he was like, we don't even go up the stairs? What's in there? And I was like, don't worry, we will eventually find out, y'all. It's not the end of the story. It is just the end of it for right now. I already know what's in there. I know what it means for the innkeeper. So some of the things I wanted to point out were some of the fun costumes. Did y'all recognize that the witch who was the narrator for Crows and Candles, who speaks to the animal, that she's dressed up like the Princess Bride pirate and even says, as you wish. The Curious Witch isn't wearing the Queen of Hearts costume. That is right, because that is a totally different character. Queen of Hearts is not the Curious Witch. I just got to say it like I see it. Totally different character. So I think it was in the bonus episode after the wedding. It's called At the Reception. It's on the Premium Plus feed, where the baker wanders into that library and talks about how much she loves it and that she has always wondered if there was a secret compartment in a house like this, but that she'd almost rather not find out in case it wasn't there and dashed her hopes. And right then I was like, oh, well, there definitely is, and I will write about it. So that's when I planted that seed to write about that, that secret stairway that leads up to, well, I know where. I really loved the detail of the witch, first of all, with her black salt. The idea of black salt being a protective charm and that you take ashes from a sacred fire, and to think about what was sacred at the inn, or places where people shared and made memories. I make black salt. I use fire from my own fireplace where my wife and I and our dogs sit and watch movies and have family time, and mix it with salt and you know, protect my house with it. And y'all knew I was a witch already, right? You knew that. And so I really love that detail of her, just that feeling of protective ownership that the villagers have, that I'm going to look out for you. Even if you don't know I'm doing it, I'm going to look out for you. I'm going to put something in place to keep you safe. That's the village I want to live in, and I think that you want to live in too. That just people are just looking for little ways to care for and protect each other. And then I really loved that she was dressed up in her curlers and her robe and pink bunny slippers. I put my hair in curlers on the reg, and when I do, my wife calls me Madge. She goes, "Oh, hey, Madge. Getting ready?" So that was maybe a little me appearance in the story, that I was out there with my favorite wooden spoon to get my ashes and mix up my protective salts and spread them out to take care of those that I care about, which is the village and you. A little bit, that's me sprinkling salt around you to say that wherever you are, asleep in your bed, I'll watch over, I'll protect. Please let me know if you have any questions about any of these stories, any of the Halloween stories. And then I'm going to tell you a little about my own haunted house. You are very welcome. Oh, sorry. It is my honor to watch over so many people as they rest. Which witch do I relate to more? Definitely the Curious Shop owner, because I do have that those moments of strong intuition and knowing. I'm so glad that I help you sleep. You've yet to hear more than 5 minutes of the stories. Fantastic. That's really the best. How many witches are in the circle? I think there are at least 5 or 6. So there's more folks for us to meet, for sure. We also know about the Tea Witch. So I live in your house, or I live in a house that is Marmalade in the haunted house. No, I don't think so. Oh, I don't think there's anything in Marmalade's house. Can we meet another witch with a raven familiar? I thought about ravens when I wrote about the crow story. They are separate birds. I looked it up, but I'm sure we'll learn more. Where did Rosa come from, the one whose grave at the coven came across the... So Rosa was just a villager who lived, maybe 100 years ago, and didn't have a coven until our coven adopted her, but was just a special sort of person. The Tea Witch is your fave. First episode. First episodes mean a lot, right? When you have the one that first brought you into the village and helped you sleep. So I live in a house that is 99 years old and was built by a man named Paul McFarlane. And he was, as much as anyone could be this, a famous puppeteer. His puppets are now in the Detroit Institute of Arts. My wife and I went to visit them. And he was also an artist in many ways. He wrote and translated books. I have some of his books that I found on eBay and in antique booksellers. He painted backdrops for theater. He was just generally an artist. And in the house, there is an elevated area where the puppet's stage was, and then a lowered area where the seats were, where people could watch the puppet shows. And I have a strong feeling of connection to Paul. Now, this is supposition, but these are pictures that came down from our attic, and I talk about this in the episode Spooky Season of Stories from the Village of Nothing Much, which if you aren't listening to that, my friends, you are missing out. So much fun. So, let's see if you can see this. This came out of the attic. This is not my house. I think this young man with suspenders might be Paul. I think this is his house that he grew up somewhere in Grosse Pointe Shores, Michigan. And I think that this is his family, in front of his family house. Every night around 9:45, there is just a single knock from the attic. I have to say sometimes it's more than just once a night. But it comes often at moments when we need to go to sleep, and I think it's a gentle reminder to ladies, put your phones down, read a book, fall asleep, listen to your podcast, go to sleep. Often they have come at moments when I felt quite alone. I remember the day before I went in to go record the audiobook of Nothing Much Happens, I was nervous about that. Audiobooks mean a lot to me. And I remember my wife was out of town for business. I was all alone. My anxiety was sky high. And I remember laying in bed just watching my thoughts race and hearing a knock in the attic. And it felt like companionship, like friend, like support. That's how my house haunting has always felt. There's a couple other things going on. The stairs that come down from the attic, just like in Halloween in an old house, that 100% happens here. So when this came down from the attic, which I do not go to because I feel like the attic is none of my business, and I just don't need to go up there. But my electrician went up there and said, there's some pictures. Can I bring them down? I want to show you the other two pictures he brought down. But wait. These are some severe looking folks. The funny thing was, we brought them down out of the attic. After that, for 6 months, not a single knock. The knock went silent. And I was like, oh, they just wanted out. Eventually the knock came back. We don't know what it means. Now I feel sort of the responsibility to keep these pictures. I don't know who these people are. It might be the last images of them that exist. So I do keep them kind of safely tucked away somewhere. But I don't really feel like I want to hang them on the wall. You know what I mean? Okay, I have to hop over to Facebook for that live in just a minute. So I thought I'd finish. You guys have all heard my sleepy voice. I thought I'd give you a little scare because I have another voice. So, happy Halloween. And remember, there's always room for one more. Sweet dreams tonight.